people see rest and they think of like the person glued to their couch and like watching Netflix, but it's so much more than that because people are like, oh yeah, like I'm resting while they're laying there flipping through Instagram, flipping through TikTok. And you're like, well, actually, you're not.
What if there are things we never had the opportunity to learn? We've all been to school or training, but there are things they never taught us that actually make a powerful difference in life. I'm here to share with you all the pieces you've been missing: mindset, health, success, and more. And we'll all learn together from guests along the way. We may not have learned it the traditional way, but oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do things differently. OMG. Hello. I am happy to be back with you again. So let's think about this. Sometimes we find it hard to take some time to rest. Maybe we feel like we're slacking off. We shouldn't take any time off. If you're working from home, maybe the computer or the phone or the email is always there, kind of tapping you on the shoulder. Or sometimes we think we're resting, but we're doing things that do not really allow our minds to rest. They're not really restful. So, this week on today's episode, we're talking about types of rest and how important that is. And we're recording this after the holidays, during the winter. And I know it's spring now when you're listening to this, but we're going to talk about a few different periods of time when this is really important. And I'm so happy to have my guest with me today, Cherry Poon-Crowie. She is a registered nurse, life coach, and doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So many things to unpack there. She embarked on a journey to teach easy and digestible wellness tips and tricks. And her secret sauce is mind-body connection. Yes, rest, play, and creativity. And Cherry's goal is to help us reconnect with our bodies and learn how to go with the flow of the seasons, both in nature and in life. So let's go ahead and get started. Cherry, I'm so glad to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I like to start with your story because I think we all have something powerful that happens that sort of leads us down a path to what we decide to do. So tell us how you ended up becoming a life coach.
Yes, of course. I think that, to start off, I'll say that, I am a registered nurse and I still am a registered nurse. So I still work in the hospital. And I think that that's kind of the thing that kicked it all off. I've worked in the ICU over COVID and really did burn myself out over that time and just trying to give it my all. And, my patients deserve the best from me. But when a health system often doesn't align with your values and you still push to give the best product, you're going to burn yourself out. And I think that that's where I got to. And I think the biggest spark in the machine for this was when I was reaching out for mental health resources. This is in Canada, of course. We have agencies that can assist financially and, obviously for psychological need as well. They gave me kickback. One organization said I had no plan to get better. And I obviously had to say, I don't have the finances nor resources to, show you evidence that I'm going to see everyone every week if someone can't financially support me. And when they sent me to the second agency said, well, your colleagues are doing fine, so why wouldn't you?
Mm.
And often I see anger as that spark in my machine, anger as injustice. And I was like, you know what? I deserve better, which means those around me deserve better, which meant that I had time to relax, kick back, go to the drawing board, and with even the help of, my sister-in-law as a social worker, draw out what that looks like and how I can support those around me. And that's what kind of kickstarted all of this. And although I am a nurse and, my background mostly is nursing, I believe that this is a big thing that impacts everybody. And so I try to have my wellness teachings and tips land in everybody's circle and be applicable to a lot of different people.
That's really meaningful for me personally, and probably for a lot of people, I used to be a teacher. And while obviously teaching and nursing are two totally different things, I left sort of for similar reasons. I could feel myself burning out, and
Mhm.
I had a lot of issues with the system and how everything was done. And it's hard to be in that position for sure. I love that you did something good with it, that you can help other people.
And I hope that, by speaking on platforms like this, by being on my own platform, that it is the spark in the machine that somebody else needs to, get out there and do that thing that they are called to do in this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's when it's powerful, is when we feel like we're called to do it. I think that's when we really kind of resonate with people too, because we really believe in what we're doing.
Totally.
Okay. So that means this is going to be a powerful episode because we believe in what we're doing.
Yes.
Let's talk about the topic at hand, which
hmm
is rest. And I really feel like I can't go on Instagram, definitely, and maybe other social media lately and not see something about either burnout and how to deal with that. And I've done episodes on the podcast about that. It's important,
hmm
or about rest and, make sure you take some downtime. And many of us aren't doing that. So why is rest so important?
I think a big thing about it is like people see rest and they think of like the person glued to their couch and like watching Netflix, but it's so much more than that because people are like, oh yeah, like I'm resting while they're laying there flipping through Instagram, flipping through TikTok. And you're like, well, actually, you're not. And specifically, just in this time of year while we're talking, is this type of rest at this time of year is often that like Christmas post holiday rest
Mm,
that kind of happens that a lot of burnout happens at this time of year specific to the holidays, the expectations, the emotions that happen at this time of year. But that's not to say that that doesn't trickle in because then what happens in January is all your like any individual's New Year's goals and a workplace's year-end review to say we want to do this, we
right.
want to do that. How are you hitting this budget? How are you going to hit next year's budget? And I mean, some listeners may have already heard that and been like, "Oh, like I just feel that overwhelm building in my chest." And I think that for this time of year, they often talk about that. But I think as well, a lot of different life coaches and wellness teachers are just coming to the point of which we really do need to talk about this because people think they're resting when they're really not. And then they don't understand why, they're not being the best parents they can be. They're not being the best partner they can be, or they're not producing the best amount of work at work. And so I think that's why a lot of people and myself are very passionate about fighting that narrative of what rest actually looks like.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're going to dive into this, because when we talked originally about doing this episode, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are terrible at taking the day off or taking even an afternoon off and doing any sort of rest. And I know that a lot of people who work from home are having trouble disconnecting from their
Mhm.
work. But we're going to go deeper than that, because from what you've just said, maybe we think we're resting,
Yeah.
but we're really not, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And we can dive into those 7 kinds of rest that I've talked about on my platform. And because, like I'd mentioned, everyone thinks like, yeah, I'm resting. I spent all of Christmas laying on the couch, like watching Christmas movies. And you're like, no, like that's not really how that works. So I will shape a lot of my examples around Christmas just because of that time of year that had recently passed. And a lot of people can correlate with that. So I will talk about the rest that can relate mostly with Christmas first, and then I'll add the other ones in between because I have to add new examples for that one. So the first one that I'll use is like a sensory rest. So often a sensory rest is just like from the noise, from the craziness that's gone on. Like my biggest example that I just gave recently was like, think about the fact that you have to go to 2 Christmas events in a day. You have to haul all your kids there. It's an ugly Christmas sweater event. So you're already wearing an itchy sweater. You get to the first event, the ham is already burning, uncle's laughing in the living room, Christmas music is playing, someone's calling for you there, you hear the rustling of the presents under the tree. And like, I made very small examples, but I think everyone is already feeling like that itch. under
Yeah.
their skin from that. And that is that sensory rest. And that exists in workplace too, right? Like whether they have corporate events that you have to go out to and, you've been already standing in your very uncomfortable high heels all day. And now you're going to go to this corporate event and then you're going to do it all again tomorrow without taking
Yep.
some sensory rest. And my biggest tips and takeaway for sensory rest is like some people know this, but some people subconsciously know this is like a favorite pair of pajamas or that like outfit that you always wear either after or the day that you've planned your rest is always go into that same outfit because then your body
Mm.
and mind kind of connect that rest is like, oh, like once I put on these jammies I know that I can rest. Or after a long day of standing in your heels, throwing on that outfit to tell your body to just like relax, like truly take away the tension that's been sitting in your body all day.
So that when you say sensory rest, it's changing, I guess, the feel of the clothing, it's quieting your environment,
Mhm,
that sort of
mhm.
thing is what you mean.
Totally, yeah, and I sometimes even mention, like, I know it's not applicable for all people, but sometimes even going on do not disturb if needed, because like,
Mm.
the sensory from our phone as well, whether you can delegate to your partner or turn on your phone so that you only get important calls, very, very important thing at the end of the day.
Right. It just feels calming as I think about that. And at any time of year, I can see how this would be powerful. I'm imagining the spring when if you have kids, there's a billion activities or it's towards the end of school and you feel like you're going all the time. So same thing. Yeah.
Totally, yeah, and even in the summer, like, I'm thinking about it now, like, that sticky hot summer and, being out all day and the like, at a little beach or something, totally, lots of ways to apply it.
Awesome. Okay, so sensory rest is one. Perfect.
Yes, and then the next one is the rest that everyone thinks about when they talk about rest. This is that physical rest. That actual laying down, the not hustling and bustling around, right? For those of us that might be really active, it may be the time to, maybe not stop that activity you really like doing, but doing a gentler activity for CrossFitters, power trainers, or powerlifters, or whatever it might be, is going for something more gentle, as well as when you do physically rest. Again, that do not disturb also applies in this situation is you're not answering work emails, you're not on social media, whatever your kind of, workplace looks like. You maybe take a day off of your any social platforms that you might work on and go on do not disturb. And maybe it's a day of just like light stretching, and like
Mm.
maybe you don't cook that day. You plan towards the day that like, you order yourself some food and have like a really slow going day. And sometimes it really means it's kind of a big deal when you actually flip a real book versus an ebook. Obviously those of us may not have accessibility to that, but it takes you away from the screen, that physical stimulation that you get from staring at a phone all day. Because obviously, even when you turn on your ebooks and if you don't turn off the rest of the notifications, you're just going to get everything all at once.
You know what? I'm a big ebook reader, and that is a
Mhm.
very good point.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a Kindle, I totally get it because then it totally turns it off. But like, I get it. I'm an ebook reader too, right? And it's like, it's right there. But then as you're reading it without turning off the do not disturb, you see the notifications
Yep.
pinging up top. And then it draws your attention away from that wonderful story that you may have been reading.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So, physical rest can be lightening your workout, slowing down, doing your day a little differently. It's not necessarily just napping and sleeping, right?
Totally. And there's nothing wrong with napping and sleeping too, because I think that, of course, like new parents and people like that really need that. But I want people to remember that it's not the only way to rest at the end of the day.
I like that.
Yes.
So, then number three.
Yes, we will move on to emotional rest. So this one still
Mm.
kind of ties into Christmas as well. I know the holidays really kind of bring on a lot of mixed emotions for people, not always positive, not always neutral at the end of the day. And so, when you think of those big holiday gatherings that you are going to because it will make your mom happy, because it's just what you did as a family growing up and always did as you grew up. And on top of that, maybe going to a corporate event for your partner, not because you want to, but because your partner, is going and this is a big thing. And so you say, okay. But you might also work a really peoply job. Like, as you said, as a teacher or as a nurse, you have to deal with a lot of energies going day in and day out. And adding all of that and Christmas on top of it is you need that emotional rest from everything. Again, it's like that do not disturb that I tell people to turn on. Or maybe you set very firm boundaries at these Christmas events to say that, you know what, I'm coming from this time to this time and then I will leave at the end of it. And
Mm.
it's for my own good at the end of the day. And, when you put up boundaries to tell family or friends to say, I don't want to do this, and this is my limit, and this is what I can give you. And if they still say no, it's for them to process and not for you to push your own boundary and to do that one thing because family really wants you to do it. And so that's a really big one. Or even to these corporate events, I always say, you and your partner, especially if they're really good partners, have like a little scapegoat and say, oh, a little tummy ache or something. And that way
Yes.
you can get yourself home at the end of the day. But understand that don't have FOMO and give into it too and be like, oh, like, what if I miss out on all these fun things that could happen? And you end up going and then you really do, fizzle out the rest of the social battery that you do have and, could be
Right.
quite detrimental going forward.
It's a good point that some of us have jobs that are very people-y. I like how you said that
Mhm.
because depending on the day, that group of people could really drain us emotionally.
Totally.
I mean, 100% I remember this from teaching.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Some days are great and you get all sorts of positive energy, and some days are the opposite of that.
Totally.
Good point to have a break.
Yes.
Gut health is such a huge part of living healthy. When I learned that the health of our gut affects our hormone levels, how our digestion works, what we absorb into our body in terms of nutrients, and even how our brains work, I was surprised. Every morning, I started using a Green Gut Glow drink to make sure that I was taking care of my brain, skin, nail, hair, gut, and making sure I get enough veggies because I don't know if I would eat enough otherwise. I have felt a difference minimizing puffiness and bloating for sure. Go have a look at omgteachme.com/recommendations and look for the Green Gut Glow Plus.
And then we can move on to talk a little bit because they kind of connect together is like that social rest. I often talk about a lot of corporate people. Like Fridays are a big day where people are like, let's go out for drinks or let's go out for dinner. Or, midweek they do like a midweek lunch and everything. And again, it's looking at your own social battery and considering what do I have the capacity for? I think a big thing that I do talk about as well is for those that still have their menstrual cycle, but even for those that don't, it's just that you have to keep track of your energy fluctuations is depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, you may or may not have the capacity to be
Mm.
socializing and taking in the energy and the emotions of other people. And that's very normal. It's another one of those mechanisms in our body that we've been told to like shut away, not listen to. We can do it. It's corporate. I have to look good. It's my new job. Not considering the fact that your body has been screaming at you for like days to be like, don't do this. Please don't do this.
Yes, great point. And this is something that, I mean, I'm in my 50s.
Mm.
So, just putting it out there, I didn't know anything about that until
Mhm.
recently. Zero. So I went through my whole life just having no idea that that was a thing to pay attention to these different times of the month for emotional and social reasons as well. Yeah.
Totally. And like I think that it can sometimes for women even come to a point of like shame. It'll be like, well, so and so is doing it. Why can't I do it? Like they feel good,
Mhm.
so I should feel good too. And I think that this is a great podcast for this space to teach people that, what, this is so normal that we lean into our cycle. And for things like socializing, we don't do it just for a couple of days until things have blown over or until the cycle has reset because it always does.
Yeah. And I don't want us to get too far off track. However, I
Mhm.
know there are people listening right now who are saying, well, wait, which part of the month are you talking about? Because they don't have a clue. So can you like tell us quickly?
Yes, of course. So your most sociable time is usually right after your period in that follicular phase and your early luteal phase. So that'd be follicular ovulation and early luteal. And that usually will last you from I'll give a couple of days after period. So let's say day 8. And then, if your cycle is normal from like up to day 21, just before your next cycle, sometimes less depending on some people, but those are kind of your peak energy days because as soon as you kind of hit late luteal and of course into menstruation, your body's like, nope, tap me out,
Mm.
I'm done kind of thing. But so that'll be a big thing for listeners as well, is to start tracking if they don't already do. And then they can start to really become in tune with where they are and why their energy is fluctuating.
That's a great tip. Thank you. I'm convinced there are people who just learned something right now. So awesome.
Hooray. And then with that, I will also then jump into like a mental rest because it often ties into that menstrual cycle bit as well, is where your kind of brain is at, whether it's having another endeavor like you and I do outside of our jobs,
Mhm.
as well as dealing with people at our work and wanting to like build new ideas and all these new things that you want to do, and even for people that are like, oh, I want to play soccer, or oh, I want to be part of like the leadership team of this thing, or parent council, or whatever it might be, is keeping in mind, what is on your plate and what is needed of you. Like what things are like you can tangibly like plan around, and which things you can't tangibly plan around. Like, with our endeavors, our secondary endeavors of podcasting and everything, we can kind of plan our lives around that, which is something very beautiful. And then oftentimes, if we have a day job, those are harder things to kind of plan around, and considering that going in and taking some mental rest, because oftentimes, if our day job will totally drain us, we will have no spark left to do the
True.
wonderful thing that we want to plan. And that mental rest, again, is shutting off the phone, your content planning calendar, your idea mind map can wait. The person that is waiting for your information, they will wait for you, because there is something that they're going to take away from you. And tomorrow isn't going to run away from us. I think that is what I try to remind people. Don't forget, tomorrow will not run away from you.
Good point. Good
Mhm,
point. Because a lot of times all of this stuff is running in the back of our minds all the time too,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So part of it is probably figuring out a way to quiet that temporarily.
Totally. And that's why it's like sometimes it's just like shutting off your phone. And again, whether you have an e reader or actually flipping open a book that you just want to read, or to like lose yourself in for a little bit, is it's a really good thing. And I think that a big thing I talk about as well is like a lot of people are like, oh, I have so many hobbies or so many things that I want to do. And I jump from thing to thing to thing. And sometimes including quieter things, excuse me, like reading
Mm,
and spending time with family, going out and like, in a quiet space like a coffee shop, or just like quietly walking on a treadmill with a podcast going. It's like those are some great spaces where that spark comes back in a place where you're not just sitting in front of your desk and like, you're ready and you're like, I can do this and go, and nothing comes.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that becomes frustrating and then it's a whole thing. Yes.
Yes. And then that also leads into my next one, which is that creative rest, in the sense of where people are like, oh, like I knit, I crochet, I do this, I podcast, I do like digital marketing. And it's like, those are a lot of creative things. And that creative bank of ours sometimes can run dry because
Mhm.
we're being pulled every which way. And it's not to say that we're not talented and totally able to do all these things, but oftentimes we need to rest that part of us. And so sometimes it is sitting back and, if you have the capacity for it, because as you can see, some of the rest blend together, is if
Mhm.
you have a little capacity to watch a YouTube of somebody else who's doing digital art, and then being like, wow, like I'm so inspired. And then, taking a bit of rest back and kicking back and being like, I'm going to do some physical rest, some gentle stretching. And maybe in those moments, like I said before, is where that spark kicks in. You're like, something came to me in this moment. And like maybe you don't jump on it right away because you don't have capacity that day. But that's why our phones are so lovely, or a scratch pad, and writing down an
Yes.
idea, being as specific as you can, and then you will come back to it on a different day. And that's totally okay.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is one of the things I use OneNote for on my phone and on my iPad and on everywhere. I'm always jotting things down because
Yeah.
I don't want to, I do worry that I'll forget. So if I write it down, then I can let that worry go, right? I'm not going to
Mhm.
forget, but maybe I'm not going to do it right now.
Totally. And it's just we have so much accessibility, and just remembering that like, the idea isn't going to like fizzle out and run away by any means. You can always come back to it, and it'll always be there for you.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I will move on to the last kind of rest, which is can kind of fluctuate because it may not fall into everyone's court at the end of the day, but that spiritual rest. And my biggest example of that is like, you often follow a lot of like these wellness individuals and they're like, yeah, I get up and I drink my coffee and I have a cold plunge and then I meditate for 20 minutes. And again, those are wonderful things. I'm by no means bashing what they do. There are wonderful health benefits of that. But also keeping in mind is that a good fit for you, for the individual, right? And
Mm.
considering the fact, is it now affecting your daily life? Because now you have to include the fact that you have to do a cold plunge every morning and you have to meditate for 20 minutes at a time. Being so stuck structurally and forgetting the fact that like that is so and so's routine, not Cherry's routine at the end of the day, and it's okay to fluctuate that routine to fit you at the end of the day.
Really good point. Really good point. And I actually am going to be doing a podcast episode on meditation. It's something that I think is a fit for some people and isn't a fit for some people. And so I'm
Mhm.
glad you're bringing this up. Maybe for some people it's prayer that feels like the better thing, or maybe
Mhm.
it's just being quiet, which is both of those are kind of meditation anyway, but it just feels better to do
Mhm.
it that way, you know? So
Totally.
very good point.
Yes. And so I think that those seven kinds of rest, like I was talking about, kind of meld into each other, blend into each other. And often you just have to select. I often tell people to select a top three within themselves because sometimes all seven types of rest aren't applicable for them. And so I say pick a top three. And, when you know your top three and when you know you're having like a bit of a like emotional, I wouldn't say distress, but like you're feeling a little heavy, is looking at these top three kinds of rest that you feel are applicable for you and being like, right, I went to that corporate thing last week. I am this far into my cycle and I have a very large project at work. And then it kind of helps you to hone in on which areas you might need at the end of the day to
Mhm.
rest in.
Now, do you find any patterns with people that you work with or talk with on which is the toughest or the most challenging for them to do, or which they're neglecting or anything like that?
I think it might actually be it physical is actually a hard one. People are like, "Yeah, I lay down all the time," but we just talked about it. People lay down and watch Netflix. So like at the end of the day,
Mhm.
like they're not resting period. And I think that maybe that social piece is a really big one as well as, as work has picked back up and corporate events have picked back up since COVID, people have this either a big sense of FOMO or their capacities have decreased from what it even was
Yes.
before, and they still want to keep up with what they were pre-COVID, and so they're doing all these things and their body just cannot handle it.
Yes.
As well as that sensory piece, right? Because, working in COVID, working like from home, or, just having a couple noises versus having the noises of the restaurant, the noises of the copier, the noises of this and that, right? Like it seems that the body becomes a little dysregulated because it's like, whoa, like I found a point of regulation that I should have had all along. And I
Right.
found a point of, maintenance, and then you threw me back into it. And now I'm very dysregulated and I can't do this.
You know what? That makes so much sense to me. Oh my goodness. I worked in an office prior to COVID
Mhm.
and no longer do that. I'm always working from home in all my endeavors. And at first I said, "Oh, I am not going to like this. I'm definitely an extrovert. I
Mhm.
definitely get energy from people." However, over that long period of time, I can tell I have changed. Like I am way more comfortable with less interaction with people. I still get
Mhm.
energy from being around people, but it's different. Exactly what you're just saying.
Yeah.
And I wondered, was that me? Was that happening to everyone? And I'm imagining an introvert might even have more of an issue with being so social all the time now because we just got used to not doing it.
Totally. And I think that in some job titles, those things are just unavoidable. We can't avoid those things. And so I think it's like kind of retraining the body to some of those social things. And that's why it's very important. For example, the things that you can change is making sure that when you're going to work, it's comfy outfits. if there's no dress code, you like ditch the comfy outfit. Or maybe when you're in the office is getting some of those, obviously we are not sponsored, but I really like them, the loop earplugs that go in. So you only hear what you need to, and there's just ambient noise while you do things. And
Mm.
maybe at lunchtime, you step away from your desk and make sure you go somewhere else, whether it's outside or in like a quiet cafeteria where maybe you don't want to talk to anyone, and that's okay. I think one of the biggest tips that sometimes I give to some of my clients that, they have to share like a shared lunchroom with people that talk is like just put in headphones as if you are going to listen to something, but there can be nothing going on and no one needs
Yeah.
to know. No one needs to know.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can kind of motion at them.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And at the end of the day, it's like you're just protecting yourself and setting up the boundaries for yourself and, hope that other people respect that because, like I said, a lot of people are learning a lot more about their bodies and our bodies have probably been screaming at us for a really long time and it's okay to hone in and listen to it once again in this narrative of a world that's, go 3,000 miles an hour kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I wanted to pull out of what you were saying a few minutes ago
Mhm.
is I think people might need me to repeat that what you just said is that lying on the couch and watching Netflix is not really resting.
No.
So,
No, it's not because you know what? Most people don't even end up doing that because you lie on the couch and you're watching Netflix. Your phone starts pinging off. You pick up your phone, you answer the text, or maybe that text had a puppy video in it. You click the puppy video, and then once you watch the puppy video, you start scrolling. And then now you have the stimulus of both what's in front of you and the noise from the TV behind you. And like, there's no resting in that. Your brain is still very stimulated in a way that it just does not need to be.
wow, such a good point. I can absolutely see that happening.
Yes, yes, and it happens often, a lot of my clients that I've talked to and, I'm not here to scrutinize them, but, I obviously ask them very honestly, like, "Now tell me the truth, like, do you have both the TV and your phone going?" And then they go a little quiet and they say, "Yes."
So I guess what we're saying is enjoy your favorite shows if you want to, and at the same time, know that that's not really rest and you need something else.
And I know it can be really hard for people, like, as adults, they're like, "Well, when I was a kid, I could just rest however I wanted." And, like, now as adults, like, truly at the end of the day, it's like you have to plan it. Like, whether you end up having, like, a day off, taking a personal day, whatever that might be, and planning out what you'd like that to look like. Maybe it is you do have to attend to appointments. So attend to your appointments on the personal day. And then make sure you lay out what it's going to look like when you have your rest for the afternoon. Do you go on Do Not Disturb? Do you actually physically pull out a book and read a book? Do you step out of your house and maybe, shake things up a little and go somewhere to have a walk, plan it out because at this point with how fast life is expected to be, like you kind of have to plan it out. There's just no way around it.
I agree with you 100%. And maybe if someone is really struggling with this, even if it's an hour or a half day, right? It's
Mhm.
still maybe starting that habit.
Totally. And like not being afraid to, reach out to your partner or your family and saying, like, I'm really struggling in this area. And maybe just asking very kindly, like even saying, like, could you just take the little one to the park for just an hour? And that would be just enough for you to reset, and you got to remember, you're not in that hour that the little one's gone. You're not catching up on laundry. You're not doing
Mm.
anything, whether you have to like lock yourself in your room and like throw in the headphones and whatever it might be, is allow yourself that rest because I emphasize this on my platforms as well. Is like dishes aren't going to stop piling up. Laundry's never going to stop piling up. The dishwasher is always going to be full. And so just lay down for a hot second. It's going to be fine. It always gets done.
Yes, it always does get done somehow in
Yeah.
life, in the house, in the job, in the business. It always gets done.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I always remind people is like, okay, like let's take it to a little bit of the extreme. Is tomorrow everything goes poof and it's gone? Like, does the laundry matter at the end of the day? Do the dishes really matter at the end of the day, right? What is the priority? Is that your little one got to go to the park and giggle with a grandparent for the day? That you got to just lay there for a hot second and take your deepest breath of the day so that you can be regulated for your little one when they come back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe it's also asking for help. Maybe, a parent, a grandparent can come over and help with the laundry because it got so piled up, or who
Totally.
knows?
I know. I was like, I'm trying very hard not to get on a soapbox with this one because between this, the coaching bit and the nursing bit is a lot of people don't know this, and I think that they mean this very well. But something that I get people to take away is when you know people that are in a point of grief or even a little bit of crisis or maybe just had a baby, is you tell them something very specific that you're going to come over and do. I'm going to come over and I'm going to do your laundry for you, start to finish, wash, dry, fold. Or otherwise, I'm going to come over and I'm cooking you supper and I will do the dishes. You don't need to serve me, beginning, middle, end. And being very specific in that sense, obviously within their boundaries as well, is like, but saying that, like, if
Sure.
I'm coming over, like, this is what I'm going to do. Because often people within the kindness of their heart are like, I'm gonna, like, let me know if you need anything. Like, I'm
Yes.
here to help you. And I always know that those people are kind within their heart. But when you have no energy and you're crisising and maybe even a little dysregulated, the first thing we reach for is, or remember, is not those people that reached out to us in that point. And so being specific can often be the biggest gift at the end of the day. And a lot of people aren't taught that. So that's why I make sure to let people know.
You know what? I really, really, really love that. Thank you. I think we're all going to take that away for sure, as well as if we want to really offer something specific. And they'll tell us if they don't want that thing, right? And then
Mhm.
that's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent. Well, this has been packed full of great information. Do you think we missed anything
I don't
talking
think so.
about
I
rest?
think we hit all of the things. I think it's there's so much I could talk about, but I think I hit the biggest points. And I think the biggest takeaway is just sitting for people and remembering to pick a top 3 of those kinds of rest and knowing that have it always in a toolbox. And then from that is in that toolbox creating, the tools within those categories of rest so that you can reach in for that quickly when you do feel at a point where you have no more capacity to think as to what you need in that moment.
I love that. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. Absolutely. Now that I've learned this as well. So tell us how people can find you or potentially work with you or find out about that.
Yes, of course. If you search me up on Instagram, Play, Thrive, Create with Cherry, you will find me. I should be the only person. And if you feel that you'd want to listen to me talk to you more or join you on your commutes, you can find me on any sort of podcasting platform. We are at the Bloom Narratives podcast between me and my sister in law, and you can hear us talk about a whole bunch of things related to wellness teachings and tips.
Absolutely great. And I will put those in the show notes as well so that they are easy to find.
Mhm.
And so let's go on to our last question, which is we need to add a song to the playlist. And of
Mhm.
course, I ask this to every guest. So
Mhm.
tell us a song that comes to mind when I say, what's a song that gives you some good feelings, some nostalgia, and you really enjoy listening to it?
I picked the song Ordinary People by John Legend. And I think that I picked that song because I really enjoyed his concert that I went to. Oh my gosh, I don't remember what year that was, but it was very, very nostalgic and wonderful. It wasn't in a very, very big venue, it was a very intimate venue. And it was probably one of my most favorite concerts that I went to.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect.
Mhm.
Yes, people are going to enjoy that song. I will as well. So thank you.
Yes,
Awesome.
of course.
Well, thank you, Cherry, again for joining me. This has really been packed full of great information, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope that everyone takes away a little something from today.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, leave a review, or take a screenshot and share on your social media. Let's get this message out further into the world. Now it's time to head down to the show notes to see the resources I mentioned. We may not have learned this before, but it sure is powerful now.